All right, so for my transition to design for my CCEP final project, starting with the intake form, my client is 54 years old. He's a male. A couple of things that stood out to me in the intake was that he hasn't done consistent exercise in 6 to 8 years. So right now, he exercises about 1 to 2 days a week, which consists of bike riding 2 days a week. He mentioned that he would pretty much just be starting over. Assessment will really tell me more, of course, on where he's at. His goal is to lose weight and to get in better physical shape. Working with him on the BLGs and food logs will of course, tell me more. He is getting 5 to 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep, which is decent. Wakes up at 5:30 and goes to sleep anytime between 10 and midnight. I would like to work with him on gaining more of a rhythm with sleep and waking. I also noticed that we will have to work on increasing water intake. With the food logs right off the bat, I noticed that we can work on increasing awareness around fueling and its importance, as well as upping the quality of food. In a separate conversation with my client, he mentioned he normally eats only one meal a day, but since he knew I was reviewing his meals, he made sure to eat more when logging his food. Hearing that he only eats one meal a day was definitely a red flag for me. Um, in terms of making sure he has enough fuel and energy for his day to day, and then incorporating these workouts. Here, I want to start assigning macros to jumpstart an awareness of eating consistent meals and slowly increasing that over time. For the initial consultation, what stood out to me is my client, in terms of nutrition, like I mentioned in the intake form, is that we will focus on gaining awareness around food and its importance in fueling our body. Once we focus more on getting the proper amount of nutrition, I'm hoping that energy levels will increase, um, which he mentioned that in order to get his energy up, as of right now, he has to drink a couple of cups of coffee to even get started. So I'm hoping that change will increase and will decrease some of that coffee intake. He mentioned that he never got the whole eating thing, so I feel confident that with the gradual improvement, he will not only see benefits, but he will also find ways of sustaining it. So, behavior, the big focus here will be working on being more conscious of our food, and I'm starting him with just being aware of his chewing, not skipping meals, and working on more of a rhythm for the night routine. Exercise. He has trained for marathons on his own in the past and likes to be active, but mentioned that he has limitations due to past injuries. So the assessment will really help me understand where he's at. He really enjoys biking and disc golf, so I want to incorporate that so that we are also focusing on what he likes to do for movement. He did mention that he dreads the build-up phase of this process, so I will do weekly check-ins and add a motivational component at the end of the week to help with that. He also mentioned that he does not have any interest in getting a gym membership, so I will have to explore body weight movement and incorporate some weights with a couple of pieces of equipment he does have. So, goals: he wants to lose weight and get in better physical shape, would like to feel more attractive, but his primary goal is health. Feeling limited in what he can do and doesn't want those limitations. Would love to rock climb. So these are kind of just like big goals, but he would love to rock climb and long distance cycle, um, and gaining a more positive outlook on life. Priorities: his priorities are work, church as are among the top priorities. So we will make sure that these sessions will not interfere with this. Mentions he enjoys fitness but never figured out how to do it on his own, naming that without the accountability, he would lose interest. So, weekly check ins again will definitely be helpful here. So, OPEX body move work. In the body assessment, my client is in a higher weight bracket with 37% body fat, which is higher than the healthy range for men. I will talk to him about health versus optimized aesthetics. However, I think he already has an understanding, and him stating that he would like to be more attractive, but health is more important. In the movement assessment for the scratch test, the external rotation was good, but range of motion was limited. Upper arm, right and left side was in line with the thorax and didn't notice any compensations. Internal rotation on the left side was challenging and lacked range of motion. Maybe a focus here on working tricep bicep rotator cuff lengthening could help. Right side had better range of motion compared to the left, but was still limited, including some motor control work for internal and external rotation and single arm push and pull. We're going to try to avoid anything that doesn't allow him to maintain great control due to the left shoulder injury. So air squat, arms stayed above head, but did shift forward on lowering, working on stabilizing that thorax. The knee angle was about 100 degrees, so there was some lack of depth to get to the full squat position. Might be tightness in hips and hamstrings, something to explore further. Knees were also tracking over feet when moving toward the bottom position. So toe touch traveled to about the ankles with a slight hip shift. I noticed what looked like a mid-back hump, and both legs stayed straight. So including some more stretching and lengthening for that hamstring. The lunge on the right side saw some swaying, and the front foot was moving side to side trying to find stability. That left side seemed more stable. Right side saw some swaying, and the knee, thigh were in line with the feet, and the back heel stayed up. The left side tracked over foot, and the client had chosen a shorter length for the lunge, and the back heel was down until he was at the bottom of the lunge. The shin angle was on the right side was about 90 degrees, and the left was less than 90. And the knee tracked over the foot. Noticing the torso leaning forward on the right side, the left side on lowering, noticed that the hips shift forward. I also noticed that my client on the right side was more slow and controlled with the movement, but at the bottom of the movement just disengaged the posterior chain and anterior core and fell into the lunge. So wanting to include some anterior and posterior strength and endurance work, as well as hip and hamstring work. So straight leg, both sides was unable to get past the foot past the knee. Include single leg bending progression and range of motion work. Avoid any heavy loaded or unassisted single leg bending. Front plank, no imbalances for right and left side. Shoulders were protracted, so shoulders were not directly under hands, and the midsection did start to fall until he stopped the hold, and the toes were not necessarily under the heels. Heels were further back. So wanting to include some anterior core strengthening and endurance here. For the reverse plank, there was shoulder extension on both sides. There was range of motion issues. Arms and hands were more flared out, and hands were more facing the side versus back. The client did use his heels and posterior chain to maintain the position, so that was good. Retraction seemed fine and no indication to limit pulling. So side plank, there was swaying back and forth with hips, knees, ankles, to maintain the stability here. The head on the right side was facing down, and on the left it was facing forward. Include priority side planks starting on the left, and shoulder and oblique strengthening and endurance. Isometric activities is what I'm thinking, and avoid anything that would limit great control due to that injury. A focus on motor control for all movement patterns is going to be key here, focusing on accumulation with intention of learning, then into growth. Single arm push and range of motion work, working on tricep, bicep, rotator cuff lengthening and stabilizing the thorax, strength and endurance of anterior and posterior chain. So OPEX work, I had the client use a rower instead of the assault bike because he didn't have access to the machine. My client got 90 cals on the rower. We were going to work on some aerobic capacity and pacing. Long-term plan, my client needs to focus on motor control through all movement patterns. So I have focused his long-term plan to have majority of accumulation 1 through 5, and then moving to an intensification phase towards the end of the year to increase the challenge. He did mention he really just wants to get into running, and we kind of had a discussion back and forth. So I wanted to include an intensification so it can kind of give him something to look forward to. I have the client starting at MAP 10 and then moving through 5 for this 12-month view. For short-term plan, focus on accumulation, Full body resistance for 3 days per week, and MAP 10 work 2 days a week, resting Sunday, and active recovery on Friday. For lifestyle, I prescribed a focus on increase in macros, which will also help with awareness of fueling the body. I prescribed this because the client was not eating enough throughout the day to sustain energy and body function. I also prescribed a focus on chewing food. This is to help with the awareness of food going into our body, and also to help with slowing down. As he mentioned, he does eat, when he eats during the day, it's in passing or on the go. I started with just 2 of these goals to not overwhelm my client and to provide him space to get used to all the change. After the first week, he provided me with feedback and was struggling to get certain amount of macros. Looking back, I would definitely approach this differently. Instead of providing a set number of macros to jump start his awareness of eating at least 3 meals a day, I could have just provided him a prompt or a visual for a general idea of what can be on the plate for 3 meals a day. I switched out that lifestyle prescription with focusing on increasing ounces of water per day to help balance that out. For the exercise, for Monday, Wednesday are the aerobic days. I scheduled what he enjoys, which is biking. He will focus on a consistent pace that he can maintain for an hour. I originally broke this down to 30-minute intervals to help him with pacing, but he ran out of time on I think the first week or two, and I spoke to him about it, and what happened, what was going on there, and he said he normally rides for an hour, but he just ran out of time. On Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I focus on full body resistance strength through all movement patterns. I focused more on body weight movement as he was limited in the equipment that he had. Motor control is a contraction type with the goal of to move, learn, and get comfortable with exercises, and focusing on the cyclical pieces, excuse me. Tuesday, I have full body resistance, focus on squat, pull horizontal, bend, push horizontal, pull vertical, and core focusing on obliques. So for that, for the squat, I did a wall sit to increase muscle endurance and joint stability in the squat position. Then went to a banded pull down to start building strength in this movement pattern and to build strength in the arms and back. Then went to the glute bridge to help with form and function, increasing stability in the core and strength in glutes. Also prescribed an eccentric push-up to build the pushing muscles and progress to a push-up. We also have a banded single arm overhead tricep extension, resistance through the entire range of motion, and encourage range of motion work in that pull vertical. And then the Russian twist, which is the iso movement to work that interior core. For Thursday, I have full body resistance, focusing on lunge pattern, the push vertical, squat, pull exterior rotation, pull interior rotation, and core posterior focus. So prescribing an RNT lunge to work on movement, quality, and form. Single arm, tall kneeling dumbbell push press, working on shoulder stability and focusing on single arm movement to work the imbalances. The Swiss ball body weight wall squat to help strengthen and improve balance in that movement. Dumbbell external rotation to work on the external rotation, but also benefiting the shoulder joints and rotator cuffs. The banded internal rotation, working on that internal rotation. And the front plank on knees, working that plank position and strengthening the anterior core and posterior chain. For Saturday, I have full body resistance, focusing on the patterns bend, push horizontal, pull vertical, lunge, push iso, and the core focusing on anterior. So prescribing single leg RD to target the hamstrings and hips. The reverse scap push-ups, increasing strength in upper body and working range of motion. Single arm bent over dumbbell row, working the imbalances. The split squat, progressing the pattern and promoting mobility. Top down dumbbell bench press, working on range of motion in that pattern. And alternating dead bug, working on challenging that anterior core. Just some other notes. I had to switch the eccentric push up about the second week, I believe, because the past injury that my client had in his wrist was making this hard to get full range of motion. So switch that to an incline push up on the bench to remove some of that pressure for the wrist. There were some consistency issues with the workouts, but when I did check in with my client, there were some extenuating circumstances where his aunt fell ill and was injured, so had various things come up um, that kind of got in his way of moving his body that day. The following week, there was also things that he was involved in, so that created some consistency issues. He focused more on biking during these times. After those circumstances, I did notice that there was still some struggle with completing the workout. So at the end, I did a reset week and focused on asking him questions to help him find his why for wanting to do this work. I will follow up with him on our monthly consultation.